It's 1976 and Australia is restless. Newly elected Prime Minister Malcolm Fraser arrives to speak at Monash University to open an education centre for children. He's met not with applause, but with anger. Thousands of university students surround the lecture theatre, chanting and blocking the exits. Fraser is trapped inside and chaos ensues. The next day, the headlines call it the capture of a politician. But what this moment really captured was the ongoing discontent by sections of Australian society and its refusal to accept the democratic election of the Fraser government following the constitutional crisis and the dismissal of Gough Whitlam. This was one of the most dramatic political fallouts in Australian history. Gary Newman's documentary, How to Capture a Prime Minister, takes us back to that moment and everything that followed. The presenting sponsor for Socially Democratic is Dunn Street. Dunn Street is a campaign agency that specialises in community organising. We only work with people who want to build power to make the world a better place. And if you want to create change in 2025, then hit us up at dunnstreet.com.au. A special shout out to all of our Patreon members as well. And you can join our community for free or for as little as $1.50 a month. And you too can help support this podcast. All paid members receive a welcome gift. So if you have recently signed up, please check your inbox for a message from our producer asking for your shipping address, because without that, then we can't send you your merch. And finally, today's episode is brought to you by Maurice Blackburn Lawyers. For over a century, Maurice Blackburn has stood up for fairness, championing the rights of everyday Australians and shaping landmark legal reforms. Today, they're harnessing new technologies to make justice more accessible, more efficient, and more responsive to the needs of modern Australia. All right, let's get on with today's episode. We are taping this one late on a Monday evening on the lands of the Massachusetts people. I'm back in the hub. I'm back in Boston, and I would say it would be for work, but I would be lying because I've basically come up on the weekend just to check out a whole heap of my sporting teams. And I've literally just left the TD Garden to see the Celtics go down by 2 points against the Utah Jazz. I feel like this season for the Green is going to be a long one. But anyway, you didn't tune in to listen to this podcast for me to lament my sporting team's capitulations. You tuned in to talk politics. And our guest today is someone that I think we started to talk about getting him on the show over the summer. And we have persevered, but the timing of it actually is quite good because it's coming up to November the 11th. And our guest today has made a documentary. He's a documentary filmmaker. It centers on a particular protest at Monash University when the then Prime Minister Malcolm Fraser came to open a education centre on campus and basically got trapped in the Alexander Theatre when all of the student protests shut the whole place down. And our guest today made a documentary about it, but it's more than that. And we're going to unpack it. Gary Newman, apart from being the former lead singer of the Cars, welcome to Socially Democratic.
It's good to be with you.
I'm certain that you're sick to death of people telling you that you were the former lead singer of.
It actually doesn't get old because I respect those who actually know the reference because
different spelling.
Not does. Different spelling. I know he made a comeback not so long ago, but he went really gothic. Gary Newman. And I liked him when he was the godfather of electro back in the early 80s, late 70s.
Indeed. Okay, let's start with the story itself. The name of the documentary is How to Capture a Prime Minister, and opens with this moment at Monash University in 1976. Is that right? 76? I attended the 1997 NUS state conference there when I ran for president and lost to Knowles. So I've never had good memories about that theatre, and I didn't realise that even at the time in 1997 that this theatre actually was a centrepiece in a moment of Australian political history and drama. How did you come across this story? Because I had never even heard about this until I watched the film.
Yeah, it's a bit of a forgotten one, isn't it? I think it was my father who might have mentioned it to me. We were driving past Monash one day or something, and I think he made some reference to if a Conservative Prime Minister wouldn't dare set foot in that campus back in the day for fear of getting lynched, and he referenced this event, and I thought I'll go and go and have a little look-see in the archives, went to the State Library, and I think I was looking at student magazines on microfilm, would you believe? And that was just a wonderful experience of itself, that kind of time capsule of student activism and hijinks and political philosophy as well. It was a great window into those times. So I dug up the article from Lot's wife, and I thought, okay, well this is really something. I'll keep digging. That's how I kind of came across it.
You're right. It is a time capsule. When I watched the documentary, it just the footage that you managed to get your hands on to piece the whole story together was remarkable. Just not just the clothes and the old divvy car, police divvy vans that reminded me of that TV show Homicide. But even just the amount of footage that was taken by, I'm assuming it was by ABC News. Was that who was doing a lot of the shooting that you used in the actual footage?
Yeah. Well, back in those days, they actually shot on actual film footage. So I think it was like 16 mil film or something like that. But pretty much all the footage of the day was sourced from the ABC, with a small amount recovered from a former student who was there on the day with the union's kind of video camera, actually. So there's some grainy footage that I got from him.
So tell me, just paint a picture for folks who haven't seen the documentary. What is this documentary essentially about? Well, actually, when you first started researching it, what did you think the documentary was going to be about? I've
thought about that a lot, and it's such a long time ago. I'm not 100% sure, but I can take a really good stab. I think, for me, it was partly vicariously living a time that I, this time of enormous political activism that, I was a little bit jealous of, if I'm honest, because when I arrived at university, it was a lot tamer, and it wasn't as vibrant an experience as I was perhaps expecting. So in a way, it was, there was a personal mission for me to kind of live vicariously, off a time that was like, a bit different. But for me, it's not really about the incident itself. I mean, the incident provides the hook and the drama. As a documentary maker, or a storyteller in general, I like to use stories as a means by which to explore like really big themes, I think. And one of those themes for me is kind of this idea of a life cycle of idealism in a way, how our idealism and our political beliefs kind of change over time. So I was interested in tracking down, these rabble-rousers responsible for bailing up the PM and organising this demonstration. And I wanted to find out where they were now and how they'd changed. But the other thing that I really think about a lot and was thinking about back then was, the concept of political tribalism as well. And, I wanted to find out whether after the passing of all of this time, that the people who were primarily responsible for bailing up Malcolm Fraser, who were so enraged by his actions and felt such intense injustice at the way in which he came to power, I wanted to find out whether or not they would be prepared to forgive him in a way, and whether they'd be able to find something in common with him.
Tracking down these rabble-rousers, how did you know who to piece? Like, I mean, when you're looking at all the file footage, how did you know who you wanted to go after? Because I don't know if that would have been apparent if you're looking at all the material, apart from some of the key spokespeople, right?
Yeah. It's a funny one. I think what happened, I don't know whether it was on the same day as I was in the State Library. It may well have been, I'm not sure. But Lindsay Tanner was launching a book. It was a long time ago now, called Sideshow, I think it was. It was a book about politics and the media and the way in which, the media kind of, we all know what the media does, distorts the signal. I sort of picked up one of his books and rocked up to get him to sign it. And I thought, I'll just mention this incident to him and, see what he says. And he says, yeah, I remember it. Well, I remember it because I was there. And so Lindsay says, oh, yeah, I'll I'll be in your film, and here's a bunch of people you should kind of go and talk to, one of which was Jeannie Ray, the former head of the National Tertiary Education Union. Brian Boyd was Secretary of Trades Hall Council at the time. And sort of the list goes on. One person sort of leads to another, and, they tell you who else to kind of talk to. And, not everyone wants to go on record, but I was pleasantly surprised by the number of individuals who wanted to tell the story and were, quite proud of their actions. Yeah.
It was interesting to see them talk about or reflect on the protests and the events on that day, but also then we go on this journey with them, don't we? About, as you said before, politics is incredibly tribal, but to see them start to reflect on, I guess this is sort of the second act of the film, is introducing the character of Malcolm Fraser as a leader, and getting them to, you introduce Fraser in terms of the things that his government actually achieved beyond what we always remember Malcolm Fraser as, which is the dismissal. And then you pose that to them. Did you, when you first started looking at the documentary, what I'm interested in is, when did you think, it's more than just, this story is more than just the protest that happened in response to the dismissal? And, you go to that and so did the main protagonists from the student activist perspective talk about, we were motivated because of the way that Malcolm Fraser and the Liberals had gained power through the dismissal. And that's what was, that's where the anger came from. But then you introduce this concept of Malcolm Fraser as a politician because he won 3 elections. Like,
he did, yes.
It's not like he was an illegitimate prime minister, right? Did you know that you were going to bring that into the story? Because it does just all of a sudden appear. And all of a sudden you're like, we're not doing just the protest and Fraser getting locked in the basement at the Alexander Theatre. This is a bigger story now. I found that really, really interesting. I was wondering the genesis of that.
Look, I think it always was. Like, I always wanted to use that incident as kind of a prism to explore bigger stuff, bigger ideas. So it was always going to be that. Now, the extent to which it would be, I perhaps may not have known at the time. Funding bodies like you to almost know what you're going to create as a documentarian before you've even started. And that's kind of impossible and a bit ludicrous because, the interview process, interviewing someone for a documentary, is both the capturing of footage for the documentary and capturing of content, but it's also, in a way, part of the research process as well, because you are going to discover things in an interview that you didn't know and that you will want to follow. And so certain themes will come to the fore as people are talking. And for that reason, the interviews were actually quite long. And we used a very small fraction of what people said. They were quite long form interviews because I wanted to see, in a way, I wanted to be guided by where they would go as well.
What were some of the discoveries in the interview process that you that surprised you or took the story in a new direction?
The thing that I think is often not necessarily apparent when we kind of rake over the coals is just the extent to which the conflict of the mid-1970s, the political conflict, was framed by the Cold War in a really enormous way. So that was a theme that I really, really wanted to tease out, and I teased it out through a number of ways. I mean, I asked the subject, the subjects of the film about being under surveillance by ASIO, for example, because they were leftists. So that was something that I really wanted to tease out because it gives you an insight into the mindset of these, so-called rabble rousers and why they were. I mean, to a degree they were paranoid, right? Like Cold War paranoia was a thing, and I'm not sure it was irrational either. I mean, they had good reason to be fearful. So they would have said, or they did say, that their fear was shaped by the way in which left-wing governments had been toppled in places like South America around that time. So, they had really good reason to feel the way they did, and I can understand why they would have been motivated toward physical protest. Now, do I agree with physical protest? Well, that's another topic, but certainly fascinated me, yeah, for sure.
You said the earlier in this conversation that you wanted to live vicariously through them because, and I'm assuming at your age, and we're probably in a similar, I don't know if you're Gen X or, So you said that you attended university and it wasn't what you thought it would be compared to what it was like in the 70s. After then meeting all of these subjects and hearing from them, I mean, I've got my own thoughts. I went through the student. I mean, I am who I am today if it wasn't for the student movement. So I had my own views about these guys, and there was a bit of nostalgia, even though this was in 1976 and I went to university much later. But I want to get your thoughts on walking in there wanting to live vicariously. Did you still want to live vicariously by them after you'd made the film?
Look, I probably got my fill through the process of making the film, if I'm completely honest. I think I went to a campus that was new. So I went to Deakin University and I was in the first year of them having a law degree. So I scraped into a law degree in the mid-90s. We're talking about a campus that hadn't really necessarily established its culture yet, I don't think. I'm unclear where it would be now. But across the board, I think universities are more docile places than they were back in the 70s. Now, the mistake people make is that they think that it was always the case, prior to the 80s and 70s, that campuses were really politically vibrant places. And it's not the case. That was kind of the exception to the rule. And the reason why campuses in the 1960s and 70s became radicalized is because of the threat of conscription. So, if I had to choose between living in a period where I could be conscripted to go and fight a phony war in Vietnam and growing up in the 90s when there was no such chance, then I'd probably choose the 90s, to be quite frank,
Better music as well. But I mean, to that point, I mean, you're right, and you talk about that in the film. That the impact that conscription did have on student life. But by 1976, I mean, Whitlam had got rid of conscription,
right? Yeah,
and it's just interesting to Brian Boyd said that there was a strategy of we would just go and after the dismissal, we would just go and protest wherever Sir John Kerr, the then Governor-General, would attend public events and would go and protest wherever Malcolm Fraser would go when they were in Melbourne. I found what they were doing. There was it's and this is a criticism I have a lot of political campaigns. It was all tactics and no strategy. Like I didn't. What was the goal? And you asked a lot of them that. One of them said it was we wanted Fraser to be scared was one of the goals. And someone else had a different goal. So that I don't even think they were even that well coordinated amongst themselves. And I just, I found that interesting because I don't think that's changed much. 20 years later in the student movement, we were the same. We were all tactics and no strategy as well.
I think that's probably right. They just wanted to raise hell. And I think it was a venting of rage, to be honest with you. Yeah. I mean, you got to remember, we're talking about people who were very young, sort of thinking about that, talking about 19-year-olds kind of thing. So, I mean, with all due respect to the 19-year-old population, you probably don't have a depth of experience when it comes to political campaigning, I suppose. And I suppose what you're getting at is that, is there a point to political activity if you aren't clear on what your theory of change is, I suppose, what your objective is and how you're going to achieve it. I didn't really get a clear sense that, that existed. Certainly not on the day at Monash. I mean, for a start, they were completely unprepared for the number of people that rocked up. And, in terms of...
Which never happens in the student movement. You're never underprepared for too many people coming.
Right. But anyway, so that, they were unprepared. And it's not as though this was a single united front. I mean, we're talking about a protest that was organised by a loose confederation of warring tribes on the left side of politics in the on campus, and some a contingent came from other campuses as well. So it was it wasn't necessarily really well organised. On the other hand, I do think there is merit to showing your displeasure. I think that's justification enough to hit the streets. Does that justify the kinds of physical protests that we saw during that period? I don't know. It depends on your philosophy. I'd argue that it was probably counterproductive. And there was actually a really interesting discussion between the students about that, I think. I don't know whether it made it into the film, and it certainly featured in some of their interviews as well. I mean, I captured an enormous amount of interview footage, and I recall discussing with at least a couple of them whether or not the protests and the way it was featured kind of backfired on them, I suppose, had the effect of undermining their purpose rather than pushing it forward.
I made a note when I was watching the documentary, and I wrote down the day the trots caught the rabbit. And I don't mean to mix up trots and greyhounds, but that's what it seemed like. It was because, I mean, they literally trapped the Prime Minister in the basement of a frigging lecture theatre for I couldn't get a sense of the time. How long was he down there?
I think it was probably a couple of hours, I think. It's sort of it's a bit hard to get a sense, like there are contradicting accounts, but, it wouldn't have been longer than that, I don't think. A couple of hours, I think.
And so what I just found remarkable about all of it was just so, and I mean this in almost glowing terms, not glowing terms, I don't mean to be pejorative, how amateur everyone involved in the whole thing was, from the student leadership, the police, both the feds and VicPol, and the people basically staffing the leader of the Commonwealth of Australia. None of them really knew what they were doing. Hence why we have this essentially a stalemate that happens for, exactly you're saying, like 2-3 hours, where the leader of our country is stuck in a basement, and you've got like was his bodyguard, or was it someone from the AFP who said, I just thought about going out and firing for a couple of shots into the roof of the lecture theatre.
That's right. Yeah.
Making this shit up as they were going along.
They were. It really was amateur hour, and it was a comedy of errors. I mean, I think it wasn't that sophisticated back then, but nor did they have a really good reason to be sophisticated either, really, because Australian politicians, by and large, Australian politics historically, compared to, the States, for example, is quite moderate. And I don't think politicians, even the Prime Minister, necessarily had, prime ministers have had like a great reason to feel unsafe. So, that's part of it, I suppose. But even still, they should have been better than they were, particularly considering the times. Like, there were physical protests kind of emerging. And Fraser, funnily enough, was really stubborn about not wanting to back down and not wanting to be fearful of the people who were protesting against him. He wanted to walk among the people, and he wouldn't have it any other way. In fact, I couldn't get someone to say this on record for the film, but Fraser was really reluctant to go out the back door at Monash. He didn't want to go out the back door. Like, this was a person who for whom, I suppose, showing no fear was important. He wanted to appear strong, but unfortunately that didn't play out. But look, yeah, really, really amateurish stuff, and really hilarious cock-ups on the part of the security services. What happened afterwards was that there was a review into all of this, and ever since then, there has been much better coordination between the security services, and Prime Minister's much safer as a result. Thanks to Brian Boyd.
Very good. Another thing that came out of it, obviously, and we touched on it a little bit before, but I want to dive into a bit more detail, is the story of Malcolm Fraser. And you kind of hide old Malcolm in the documentary there for a while, and all of a sudden then he pops up and you've got an interview with him. Just give us a bit of a background about managing to get him to go on the record. Was that an easy thing to do, or?
No, it most certainly was not. It was not at all. And originally, like, I wanted his presence in the film to be a surprise for the audience, but it turns out that it's pretty important to market your film with the main character. So that idea kind of fell away. But getting Malcolm, I was involved in a democracy startup. I can't remember when it was now, quite a while ago. It was called auspol, and I think it's defunct. But they were involved with Malcolm Fraser. It was kind of one of these direct democracy kind of tech startup-y things that were, at the time it seemed quite novel. It would have been around 2009 or something like that, 2010 perhaps. And they were connected with Malcolm Fraser, and they were putting on an event in which Malcolm was to feature. And I was involved, and I was helping to organise the event, so I ended up briefing Fraser on the event that was to take place, I think at a bookstore or something, readings in Hawthorne perhaps. And so at the end of it, I thought, I'll just pop this one and ask him if he wants to be part, in my documentary. The answer, well, I thought the answer was yes. So I left the room with that impression, but and went about my business telling people that Malcolm Fraser was going to be in my film. Told the Vice Chancellor of Monash, Malcolm Fraser's going to be in my film. You should support my film. Anyway, Fraser, it seems, kind of changed his mind. I think he must have reflected on it a bit more, gone back to his files and thought, this is actually a bit of an embarrassing kind of incident for me, and I'd prefer that it sort of wasn't that well remembered, perhaps. I don't know. So, so he actually didn't. It took me another 2 years to get him. Wow. And my approach to it was to email him with updates about the film and to do it politely but firmly and tell him why he should. There were people who wanted me to go harder at him, and I didn't think that was the right approach. Well, firstly, because I didn't really have that much leverage. I'm an independent documentary maker. I didn't have a big network behind me. So I thought I had to tread carefully, and I thought that the only way to get him would be to earn his respect, actually, to demonstrate to him that I had no axe to grind against him, that I was interested in telling this story for what I think was a noble purpose. I actually wanted it to be balanced, which is why I wanted him to be in it. So these were the things this is the messaging that I was kind of getting through. I even sent him something that I'd cut together, and next thing I knew, my phone rings, and Malcolm wants to have a little chat to me about the footage that I've given him. And tell you what, he was pretty good at giving on a dressing down, I can tell you that much.
Of you?
Of me, yeah. And he was quite critical of what I put forth. But, I was just sitting there going, well, I've certainly got your attention. You've called me, so you're interested, aren't you? So I kept going, and I interviewed people around him. So I interviewed Petro Giorgio. I interviewed Alistair Drysdale, both of whom were there. I interviewed his biographer, Margaret Simons. And while I was conducting those interviews, I was conscious that what happened in those interviews would filter back to him. And then eventually I got I was driving down Burke Street or something like that, and I get a call, and it's Fraser's office on the phone. And they're like, Mr. Fraser would like to speak to you. And I'm like, okay, I'm just driving. Can I call you back? His office was like, no, Mr. Fraser would like to talk to you now. So anyway, pulled over to the left, no standing zone, and Fraser gets on the blower and proceeds to criticise me for something that actually he could only have known through one of the interviews that I'd conducted. And it was a shot across the bow that he was giving me, saying, this sort of thing would make me run a mile from a project like this. So anyway, still talking to me, and clearly the project is still on his radar. And then I think the next day or something, I got an email saying, suggesting a couple of dates for an interview, and, and asking me what sort of topics I'd like to cover. And that's kind of my very long-winded story about how Malcolm Fraser became part of the film.
And so when you sat down with him to record the interview, how did you find him as a subject?
I think about that interview a lot, and I was incredibly nervous when I went in to do that. I was a relatively inexperienced journalist and documentary maker, I would say. If I'd conducted that interview now, it'd be very different. I'd ask him different things, actually. But how did I find him? Look, Fraser was an really interesting character study, really, in a sense that his demeanour changed completely as soon as the cameras were on. When the cameras are off, the guy was actually friendly, charismatic, warm. But when the camera was on, it's like everything froze up and he was playing the role of a statesman or something. I actually liked to let him waffle a bit because I wanted just to see where it would go. I often do that with interviews because, with documentary making, there's no kind of, it's not like there's a 5-minute slot because, the weather's going to be on it midday and the midday news bulletin. So we're not time led in that sense, and you can kind of chop it up. So I actually wanted him to be able to say what he wanted to say, what his messages were for the Australian people. So I didn't dwell too much on what happened on the day, and I didn't dwell too much on the dismissal. I was quite interested in what he thought about the Australia that he found himself in now.
And it's such a strong theme that comes out of the film, and I'm just interested in personally, I walked away from the film having more admiration and respect for Malcolm Fraser than I did before the film. I'm assuming that most people would get that reaction. Was that something that you did you think that was going to happen? Like, did you know that this would have been a theme to come out of the story?
Probably not at the very beginning. I suppose my impression, I left first. I studied the dismissal in first year politics, and I loved it. We would have skimmed the surface, obviously, in a first year subject, but came away from that with admiration for Gough, Whitlam, and perhaps some level of antipathy toward Malcolm Fraser.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
We all did.
Yeah, exactly right. So that was the narrative that I bought into. People like, the people that I hung out with, the lefties that I identified with, they all didn't like him. So that was the bandwagon that I kind of sat on. It was, as time grew, time sort of wore on, how it happened, and then his stance on refugees happened with the Tampa and all of that kind of thing, and he was Malcolm Fraser kind of speaking out against it. So that was kind of partly what kind of intrigued me about this guy, So here are the Liberals, the party that he led to. I mean, the guy was a giant of the Liberal Party. I mean, he was a hero taking down Gough. Nerves of steel. I mean, incredible leadership. I mean, you can say what you like about whether his actions were. I mean, that's a separate issue. Whether or not you agree with his actions in 1975, that's something separate. But you have to admire the steely resolve of that man in what he did. Like he stared down, the government. He stared down his colleagues as well, who wanted him to back down, and he pulled it off. And that's pretty incredible, I think. So it's hard to reconcile that guy in a way with the guy who took, well, it was hard for me anyway, the guy who took that stance on refugees. And I'm like, what's going on here? How do we, I wanted to sort of pick away at that and see what was behind it. The other thing that was interesting to me, and actually one of the reasons why I had a personal interest in Malcolm Fraser, was because of his role in the end of apartheid in South Africa. Now, I'm South African, or my parents are. I was born here. He's got this he always had this really strong belief in human rights, and I found that really hard to reconcile with the story of 1975. So I wanted to explore who this guy was and kind of peek behind the curtain and see if there was something more going on.
I mean, the thing that I walked away from the documentary, knowing more about Fraser, and it sounds silly when you say it out aloud now, but he was a true small L Liberal. And if you picked him up and moved him over to the United States, he would fit absolutely perfectly within the Democratic Party. He was a quintessential centrist Liberal. And it was funny hearing, I think it was Brian Boyd was saying that, we have alignment with Malcolm Fraser when it comes to issues of what he did in terms of apartheid or what he did with the refugees from Vietnam. So he was a humanist, or he was a humanitarian, and he believed in human rights, but on the matters of class, he didn't support the trade union movement, or he didn't do things for working class people. And if I'd have been in the room, I'd go, well, what do you expect? He was a Liberal. Like that's what liberalism is. Like the Liberal Democrats in the UK are not a trade union party. The Democratic Party in the United States is a huge tent party, but there's a chunk of members of that party that don't really care about trade unions. And so I thought that, and then my mind then starts to turn to, because they were referring to him as a conservative, and that's a misappropriation. He was never a conservative. The Liberal Party, when it was first founded, and Fraser says this in the documentary, that it was always a Liberal Party, and it was smart by Menzies to choose that name the Liberal Party, which is always weird because I'm in the States right now. When people ask me about questions about Australian politics now, I have to keep on saying that the opposition is, I just call them the Conservatives, because if I say the Liberal Party, then I've got to do the whole bloody explanation of what, anyway. But, but you know what I mean? Like, it was actually a Liberal Party.
It was.
We've talked about this on the show now, on the podcast, there's this massive battle internally going inside the Liberal Party between the Liberals and the Conservatives.
Yeah, there is. It's funny, like, I had reason to be on a dating site recently, and there's that section where you place your political beliefs, and the word's liberal. If you're essentially a progressive, that they want you to put yourself down as a liberal. I'm like, shit. I hope no one kind of misunderstands me when I put this down. But actually, I think I put moderate now that I think about it, because I was worried about that. I was like,
good man.
Don't want them to think that I'm a conservative, because I'm not. Anyway, what was your question? Yeah, inside the Liberal Party. Look, the Liberal Party's in real strife. I mean, that's no secret, I think. But before I don't. You know what I find interesting is reading some of the coverage going around about the contemporary Liberals. So we have, Susan Ley and Tim Wilson, and they're regarded as kind of moderates. And I'm like, oh, are they? Like, how many actual moderates are left in, small R Liberals are left in that party? The kinds of people that they're calling like moderates these days, I don't know. I'm not convinced, to be honest with you. You know what I mean? And my issue with some of these labels in general is that they have become untethered from what their meaning used to be in the 20th century. And, I've been saying this a lot lately, but even with respect to the terms left and right, I think, the way those are bandied around in the media, I think they're untethered from what they meant in the 20th century, because these were terms that related to economics, the extent to which there was government, government should intervene in markets, and the extent to which, the public should own capital, I suppose. That was the core issue. And now, like, the concept of being a leftist is kind of code for an ill-defined group of social issues and moral positions that, I don't necessarily identify with, I think. And that's happened with this idea of being a moderate as well, and a small L liberal. I don't think the journalists that use these terms in the media really know what they mean, to be honest with you. And I think that the Liberal Party of today, I don't think it is a Liberal Party. I don't think there are many small L's in there. I don't think they deserve to call themselves that anymore, in my view. This is a Conservative Party, and more often than not a reactionary Conservative Party that, I find it very difficult to draw an ideological thread through the various positions that the Liberal Party has taken over the past decade. They bang on about being the party of the free market or markets or whatever, but when it's expedient, when it's convenient, they're anything but. Their energy policy was, let's just build some publicly funded nuclear reactors. Well, if that's not picking winners, like, I don't know what is. So, they dismantled the market-based emissions reduction scheme in favour of, paying firms to reduce their pollution. That's picking winners. So I think that they are completely devoid of, I don't even know that they have an ideology anymore, to be honest with you. It's just, let's just do what we can to cause trouble, undermine the government and try and bag ourselves an election. I can't think of any other way to describe it.
And I think that the fact that they were successful in the mid-2000s after the disaster that was the Rudd-Gillard-Rudd governments, that it kind of papered over the cracks of the structural problems that the Liberal Party have. And it's been borne out now for all to see, in particular with the rise of the Teals as well. There is a Liberal Party in Australia now, and it's the Teals. And and I just don't think that the Liberals have actually come to terms with that. Well, certainly under Dutton they didn't, and I don't get a sense that Susan Ley has or those in the leadership at the moment have come to terms with it. And I don't expect them anyway. Like, it's not even a year since the election. I think it takes folks a good 12 months to sort of go away and reflect on your losses before you start to actually work out where you need to go next. The problem is that at a federal level, the cycles are so goddamn short. They're every 3 years. You don't have a lot of time to kind of get your shit together.
Really?
But, you know, you think back to when we lost in 96, we were, you know, the Labor Party was scratching around for years to work out who the hell we were after 13 years of the Hawke-Keating era, which did a lot of things to, you know, to your point, that historically would not be the policies of a traditional working class Labor Party. No. You know, and I'm talking particularly about the opening up of the Australian economy.
Yep. Privatisation, microeconomic reforms.
Yeah, all that kind of stuff. Right?
Yeah.
And so, but these were the reasons why we won. And won relentlessly.
What were the reasons, do you think?
Oh, the way that we modernised the economy, and so therefore the Labor Party had modernised itself as well in the eyes of the voter, and it was very connected with the. There was a strong connection between the government and the people, and it's a point that Fraser says as well. You know, he makes that point. When the actual dismissal happened and he gets appointed the Prime Minister by the Governor-General and then immediately calls for an election. Now, if you were to believe the people on the street and the rallies and stuff, and I remember I was 4 months old, but I remember hearing my dad years later tell the story of my older brother saying on election night, Dad, why did the big tall man lose? I thought he was really popular, you know, and Dad was like, son, I can't explain that either, right? But, you know, Fraser and the Liberals belted Labor. And Fraser said in your documentary, Malcolm made it about himself and not about the people. And we've talked about this on this show so many times.
Wait, Whitlam did, you mean? Huh? Whitlam made it about himself?
Whitlam. Sorry, what did I say? Fraser.
Yeah.
He said, Fraser said that Gough Whitlam made that campaign about himself and not about the people. You know, and I've said, you know, folks listen to this show, they've heard me say it before. I've always quoted Bill Clinton, who I said, make it about their lives and not about ours and everything's going to be okay. That's political campaigns must be about the people you're talking to. Fraser got that. Gough didn't. Fraser won and then went on to win 2 more elections. Like, he did. We can't question his legitimacy because the guy understood the people of Australia better than we did.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tricky one because this is one of those things that I think I talked to the doco subjects at length about, and you know, a lot of that stuff didn't make it in because I really didn't want the film to get bogged down in that stuff that gets raked over every time 11th of November kind of rolls around. I wanted the film to be about more than that. But, you know, there is another school of thought around what happened to the Whitlam government. And, you know, the people that I was speaking to were kind of saying that, you know, they weren't given the opportunity to govern. There was a very significant contingent within the Liberal Party who, you know, the people that I spoke to said that they had a bit of a born-to-rule kind of attitude. They felt as though the Whitlam government wasn't legitimate. They shouldn't, you know, they didn't deserve to rule. And as a result, you know, they made the life of the Whitlam government quite difficult. You know, there was a double dissolution. I think it was in 1974 or something like that. So they faced, 3 elections in less than 3 years, really. So, you know, they didn't exactly have like an easy trot, and you add in, you know, the oil shocks and whatnot. They didn't get a clear run at it. So, you know, the Conservatives have been in power for 23 years. Whitlam comes in, 3 elections in 3 years, oil shocks, the arse falls out of the economy. And so in terms of a fair go, didn't really get one. But you're right about that election because Whitlam was campaigning on democratic principle. So these are high principles, okay? This is a highly intellectual prime minister, very smart man, big picture, big ideas, didn't resonate with the people, you know. The people were probably hurting by virtue of the economic shocks that the economy was undergoing. And, in the context of the global instability of the 1970s, you kind of add to that a crisis of supply, and things are feeling really chaotic, and people just want stuff to work. They want a job, they want a good wage, and they want to make sure that they want their unemployment benefits to be paid. They want the buses to go, whatever. So look, I think I don't know who was responsible for deciding the campaign strategy for the Labor Party, but it turned out to be the wrong message. It was a howler. Mm.
Yeah, and I mean, fast forward to 2024, we had Marshall Gance on 2 weeks ago up here in Boston, and Marshall said on the podcast when he was reflecting on the 24 presidential, he said the Democrats, in particular with Harris, tried to make the campaign about saving democracy, but people don't understand that.
No.
They don't get that. Whereas Trump was talking about no tax on tips and no tax on overtime. Yeah. And I'm going to shut the border down so our country isn't overwhelmed with migration, illegal immigrants. People, I could understand these concepts. Whereas Harris is talking about saving democracy and vibes, and that's just not good enough.
No, it's not good enough. But I by the same token, I think, I think when you're arguing on things like principles and democratic principles, it's you're on a hiding to nowhere. But I do think I would like to see the progressive side of politics, however you might want to define that, be able to engage people in complex ideas that are important and not abstract ideas. I'm talking about, articulating the rationale for certain economic policies. And economics is complicated, but economics affects everyone. Politics affects everyone. Do you know what I mean? Policy affects everyone. And we have to find ways of engaging people in policy, because otherwise populism wins. You know what I mean? Like you end up having arguments on these kind of piss weak, lowest common denominator kind of issues that don't really matter that much. Do you know what I mean? I don't know. That's just the way I see it. But that's hard. And this is something I wanted to say about the Hawke and Keating era, which you mentioned. The thing that people have got to remember about that era of the Labor Party is just the sheer amount of talent that was in that cabinet. Like that was a very, very could be the most talented cabinet in the history of Australian government, potentially.
Hall of Famers, everyone. Yeah, so many of them.
Incredible. Very, very smart people, good communicators. I mean, in Keating, you had, people were talking, he was getting people talking about microeconomic reform around the kitchen table. You know what I mean? Like he was an extraordinary, the media was different as well, right? Like the media was slower. You actually had time. I remember the other day watching a debate between Hewson and Keating, right? And the amount of time that they had to kind of just beat each other around the head on the ABC was extraordinary. You never get that much time these days. It just kept going and going and going. So there was airtime for you to articulate ideas and explain things to the population, and a population that received most of their news through the radio and the television. And so we hadn't yet hit this era of this incredibly fast news cycle and social media and all that. But, different time, but a really talented kind of cabinet as well. I don't know why I started talking about that. I can't remember.
Another part of the documentary that came out that I found interesting, and I 100% agreed with what Whitlam said, was that there was an interview that was it Geraldine Doog, wasn't it, that was interviewing
Fraser.
Malcolm Fraser back in the day. So that would have been, when was that interview?
80s. I was trying that was about 85 or something like that.
Okay, yeah. So he was no longer Prime Minister anymore. And she was trying to, sidebar, I'm convinced that my late father had a secret crush on Geraldine Doog, but anyway. I can see why. He just every Sunday night, I love that Geraldine's on the television. But that interview, she was trying to get him on this, you explain what was going on in that interview and I'll just give you my thoughts.
Yeah, so I think you're referring to the interview in which she was asking him whether or not he regrets the fact that, or whether he would have liked it if people thought better of him or loved him, or and that was an extraordinary kind of piece of footage, I thought, and I reckon it was whoever the producer was, I thought it was a brilliant idea to pair Fraser with someone like Geraldine Doogue, like a female reporter, just because, I think by virtue of her character, and she was a hard-nosed journo, but kind of delivered these killer questions with that velvety voice. You know what I mean? And so it's just it's the dynamic between Fraser and her. I've watched the whole interview and I just love the whole thing.
Why'd you put it in? Because it doesn't. Tell me why does that fit within the broader story?
Well, what I think, what I alluded to earlier was the fact that there's more to Fraser than what you see through the television, what you see through the footage when you meet him. Like, he's a man who's relaxed, cracks a good gag, wants to talk about sport. It's just like meetings. It was just like meeting someone's uncle or grandfather. I'd have a beer with him, and I wouldn't say that about a lot of politicians, especially from that side of politics. But, I wanted to show a certain vulnerability. I wanted to provide Australians with an insight into the man that they hadn't seen before. Like, even people who are engaged with politics, heavily engaged, I don't think really understand the character of Malcolm Fraser. I think very few people do. And because he kept that very guarded, as soon as the camera comes on, stiffens up. He's the elder statesman. He's the headmaster. He's very controlled. And this was a moment in which, you see this reporter kind of get under his armor, and it's kind of squishy and tender in there. She gives it a poke, and so the question kind of transcended the facade that Fraser kind of put into the world, and I thought that was a really interesting and humanising moment.
Within itself, and his response was, well, no, politics and politicians and leadership shouldn't be about popularity contests. Yes. It should be about substance, and it should be about respect. Do people respect you, and do I respect them?
Right. Yeah.
Which I 100% agree with. I think that's what leadership should be built on. Should be built on respect. So,
he was having a crack at Hawke, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Look, and there are plenty of leaders that we've had over the years that have been probably more liked than respected and have been successful in doing that. But broadly speaking, I think that.
Well, that's right.
I think that Steve Bracks is one, and I had Braxy on late last year to talk about the 99 campaign. I want to get him back on again and just talk about the actual government, because I just felt like he just walked through that entire period from 99 to 2007 or 6 or whenever he resigned, eminently liked by the Victorian population. Even though he made decisions sometimes that pissed people off, like tolling the Scoresby, still kept on getting landslide elections because people liked him. Yeah. I don't think every politician can get away with that. Malcolm Fraser knew his limitations and knew that he was never going to be a politician that was going to be liked.
It's really interesting, isn't it? I mean, because, that 83 election, you could, two very, very different candidates for the prime ministership in Hawke and Fraser. And, Hawke just killed him. I mean, Hawke was just eminently likable. But look, I do agree with. I mean, what did Fraser say? I think it was something along the lines of, I think some people are just afraid of being disliked or something like that. They're too afraid of not being liked by the population. And it's hard not to disagree with what he was saying. I mean, the thing that people don't understand, particularly on the left, what people don't understand about Malcolm Fraser is, sure, I don't agree with everything that he did at all, but he was an extremely principled man. And Margaret Simons, who knew him far better than I ever did, said that you cannot say that about many people in politics, that that they have actually stayed true to their values and their principles. She says, she has heavily researched the archival record, and she says, hands down, the guy has never been a hypocrite, and you have to respect that. Yeah. Now, in terms of governing, I think that, the thing that the thing that I think the major parties have not been that good at of late is earning the right from the population to trust them to do stuff that is a bit uncomfortable, like, and that kind of it's kind of speaks to that thing about having respect rather than being liked and being afraid of being disliked. It's about earning the respect of the people and the permission to go and do hard stuff. And the people might go, "Oh, this is a bit uncomfortable, but I trust this person." And I think we may have forgotten how to do that, or we haven't been able to do that over the last 20 years, I don't think.
It's interesting. I think the Labor Party at a federal level definitely suffers from that because, and I think that we're still, particularly the current leadership, and I'm extending it beyond Prime Minister Albanese to a whole bunch of others, we are scarred from the Rudd-Gillard years, and we are shy and we lack courage. I mean, right now, if there's ever a time to embark on a program of both tax reform and housing reform, now is the time to do it. You have got a whopping majority. Take it out for a spin. Go for a joyride. Actually go and actually make some change. But we're not going to do it because we are still the shadow of the chaos that was the Rudd and Gillard years hangs over us.
Well, I think it's that, but I think it's also short and losing two on the trot with a I mean, they call it a big ticket agenda, and by modern standards it was, I guess, but probably burnt by that as well.
Yep, definitely.
So I think that's in the mix. People, I don't know. I don't want to. Am I allowed to say things that'll upset your listeners? Or
no, it's okay. Go for it. I had a massive argument with David Feeney last week and we've all recovered from it. So by all means, go for it.
Oh, look, I like Albanese. I like him. I think he's a good person, at least from what I can tell.
But do you respect him, Gary?
I respect him, but I worry about his capacity to sell reform. And, when I remember it was the Curtin Hotel. I was sitting at the Curtin Hotel shortly after the election with some mates. I don't know why we were catching up there. It's not like this was a bunch of kind of, Labor tragics or anything like that, but it was just convenient. And I'm sitting there and, one guy's kind of complaining about, it's like, now's the time for them to, do the unpopular stuff. And this wasn't a Labor hack. Like, this is just a dude who, lives on a farm out wherever. And, and I'm like, oh shit, mate, it's been a couple of weeks. Like, maybe give him some time. But it still hasn't happened. And, I think that's a shame. I mean, if there was a time to kind of just do some stuff that made sense that you knew was going to cause a bit of a ruckus, but in 3 years' time, no one's going to give a shit because nothing happened and the world moved on, then that was the time with that whopping majority, I suppose. And then, you've got to decide whether or not you can live with being accused of not having a mandate. But, look, I think that, I'm a bit disappointed perhaps in the fact that they haven't done that. But I think, in terms of this issue of Labor being scarred, I think that's right. I think it's both the Rudd-Gillard years and the Shorten years, but I think you've also got to take into account the cattle. And this is not, we are not talking about a cabinet nearly as talented as what Hawke and Keating had at their disposal. You've got a handful of all-stars. Below that, I mean, I listen to these people on the radio and I find them to be pretty uninspiring, to be honest with you. So I don't think that, the secretary of the Labor Party perhaps might be of a view that that they're better off being a bit more cautious than that, because if they go for it on some ambitious reforms and suddenly the story's about that, they might not have the people who can think on their feet and articulate to the public why they're doing what they're doing.
Yeah, it's I mean, we're almost at the end of the year. I do wonder what next year looks like for federal Labor and what their agenda is, and if we are going to get any kind of substantial reform that we've talked about, or are they just going to be sort of effective middle managers that are delivering on the promises they said they'll do, and try not to be reactive to what's happening in the world around us, and have some sort of proactivity in coming up with. It's also about, I mean, geez, we do a whole nother podcast on this, but like the creativity of coming up with ideas that actually address the challenges that folks experience. I do think that we may look. I don't know. I've never thought about whether or not we've got heavy hitters at the top of the batting lineup.
But there are some, but you know.
But what I do think is that across the caucus, it's a fundamentally different looking caucus than it was under the Hawke-Keating era. I think it actually more reflects Australia and Australian society now than it did in the 80s. And there's still more work to be done, but I think we're getting better at that. And I think that's a good thing. And I think that our candidates across the board have been reasonably well selected and are reasonably well engaged and in touch with their local constituencies. And I think that's a good foundation for the party and broadly for democracy. We're holding up our end of the bargain anyway. And that means that if they are connected with their constituencies and listening to their constituencies and hearing their concerns, then the next part is, well, let's come up with some solutions to fix some of those problems. And sometimes it isn't just big structural reform, right? Sometimes it actually is just things like getting rid of 150 level crossings because people are like, this is a fucking pain in the ass. So maybe they're going to be that kind of government. Maybe they're going to be the government that just sort of does those sort of smaller things everywhere that makes life better for people.
Like possibly, but I mean, you know, I just got back from camping and having an argument with someone who was suggesting that the Labor and the Liberal parties are the same. And I'm just like, what planet are you on, mate? Like, yeah, it's garbage. You know, and, you know, there are like, well, the Labor Party actually has credible policies. I mean, I've never been a Labor Party member, right? So I don't really have any skin in the game here, but I know a party with policies when I see one. And I think this is the other thing that's frustrating me about this government, because the people want to be told a story. They want to listen to a story about what you're doing, and they want to listen to a story about the country, and they want to feel good about their country, and they want to feel good about you as a government. And it's not as though they haven't been doing anything, right? Like, I mean, I read the industrial policy. I thought it was pretty good. So
you're the one that read it.
Hey, yeah,
you're the one who read it. It's good.
Yeah. I'm the guy. But you know, they have been doing stuff. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not like they've been sitting on their hands. I'm not saying that they've been as active as I would like them to be. I mean, I don't think the housing policy is where it should be, in my view. But I understand why that's what they've gone with. But I mean, the point is that it's hard to really grasp onto a narrative about this government. And if it's hard for me to grasp onto a narrative, then it's, you know, the average person's going to have Buckley's chance, because most people aren't interested in politics, if you know what I mean. So I think that's a bit of a problem for them as well.
Well, your story has a narrative and it makes for a great film, and I really recommend people to go and see it. Now, it's going to get re-released. Yeah. Tell us where and when and how can you go and see it?
Well, on the 11th of November, it'll be available for a very short time. Just for the 11th, you'll be able to watch it and stream it. So if you go to howtocaptureapm.com, you're able to do it straight from the website from your phone. So if you've got Chromecast or AirPlay on your phone, you can watch it on the telly. And I'll also be holding an event on the 23rd of November at Fed Square, the Australian Centre for the Moving Image, and the event's called Democracy After the Dismissal. And I'll be talking to a fellow, well, we'll be screening the film, but after that I'll be talking to a fellow who collaborated with Malcolm Fraser on a manifesto for a new political party. You know, Fraser tore up his membership in 2008 or whatever, and was working on this manifesto before he died, and all the momentum kind of fell away when he died. But the guy who was working with was actually a Labor man. His name's Mike Richards. It turns out he was, he was the chief of staff for Simon Crean, I think, and a bunch of other Labor leaders. And he was collaborating with Fraser on this. Turns out he's my mate's father-in-law. So I'll be talking to him straight after about this manifesto, and we'll be speculating as to what a truly 21st century political party might look like and scratching our chins about that. So that's the 23rd of November at Fed Square. Tickets via Humanitics.
Great. We'll put all the links in the show notes. We encourage those who are in Melbourne to go down and check it out. So it's screening on the 11th of November. Can't forget that one. You should remember that one.
Yep.
And then when is it? The 23rd is the live screening at Acme.
Yeah, that's the one at Acme. I think it's starting about 12:30 or something like that.
Fantastic. Good stuff.
But also, if anyone wants to, I need to get around to doing a screening in Sydney as well. But the idea is to do some community screenings as well. So get in touch and I'll rock up with a projector and we'll do it in your Scout Hall. Wonderful.
There you go.
All right.
Gary Newman, thank you so much for coming on the show, and good luck with the next screening.
Yeah, Ripper. Thanks. It's been a real pleasure. I've enjoyed the chat.
Hey, Social Democrats. Thanks for listening. Today's episode was hosted by myself, Stephen Donnelly, and produced by Grace Eyre. If you like the show, please rate us and review us wherever you get your podcasts. And if you really like the show, then join our Patreon community for early and ad-free access to each episode. We regularly take questions and comments from our Patreon members, so get in there if you want to have your say. And finally, get all the latest updates and bonus content by following Socially Democratic on our social media channels. The links are in our show notes. See you next Friday.